I want you to imagine something. Imagine Vi hadn't left Jinx in a fit of anger here. What would have happened? The entire story of Arcane would be changed, but other characters would still keep their individual story. Silco would still want to make Zaun, Jace would still be inventing Hex Tech, and Marcus would still be looking for someone to take the fall for the break-in in Jace's lab. Let's see what would happen to all of these characters in the universe where Vi saves Jinx. Obviously, instead of being Jinx, Jinx would be Powder. She was always unstable even as a child. She doesn't even cry at the death surrounding her at the bridge, but perhaps with Vi's guidance she could remain relatively stable. It is possible that they both get arrested by Marcus like Vi was, but that seems highly unlikely, given that he'd have to deal with two people instead of one. Vi would have no reason to end up as the enforcer she inevitably becomes in the lore, and she would likely want revenge on Silco, given how she immediately attacks Savika on sight. This would result in a storyline of Vi and Jinx trying to sabotage or attack Silco in a more traditional good versus evil story. The kind of story that Arcane has really shown itself to be anything but. But on a plus side, they'd probably be teaming up with Echo to do all this. The interesting question for Vi and Powder here is, do they respect Vander's wishes to remain peaceful? Or would they get swept up in the anti-Piltover sentiment? It's hard to say, but that would be such an interesting conflict to see resolved. Silco would still be concerned with creating Zaun, but with one crucial difference. He wouldn't have the weakness of Jinx. At the end, when he's offered to create the Nation of Zaun in exchange for Jinx, he realizes that he is unable to do it because he loves Jinx, just like Vander was all those years ago. If he could still muscle his way into a negotiating position in this universe, he would undoubtedly be responsible for the creation of Zaun. Of course, there would still be many differences in the journey there. His crew would have to deal with the Fireflies on their own, he wouldn't have the refined Hex Tech crystal anymore, but Silco is cunning, and I think he would inevitably find a way to do it. This is the only Topsider whose story would be significantly changed by Powder and Vi staying together. Without Jinx's attack, she wouldn't have the clues necessary to piece together where the attacks are coming from, and without Vi, she especially wouldn't be able to figure out that it was Silco. Also, since Marcus wouldn't die in Jinx's attack on the bridge, there would be no opportunity for promotion to Head of Enforcers, which is likely what's going to happen in Season 2. In this case, she would have a much more self-contained storyline about gaining independence from her parents and generally realizing her own power. Other than that, there would only be small differences to certain character stories. I think Echo would still go on to found the Firelights because he did that in response to Silco spreading shimmer in the underworld, and Silco would still be doing that. Jace would also have a minor difference, but an important one, in that without Vi working with Caitlyn and speaking to the council, he wouldn't be goaded into attacking the Shimmer Factory, he wouldn't have killed this boy. And you could argue that this would mean that he would never offer Silco his Nation of Zaun, but I think what he fears most is war, and inevitably, that is what Silco is prepared to do for independence, so I think he'd still give Silco that offer inevitably. The only other time that Vi could have saved Jinx was on episode 6, on top of the tower. I think this plotline would have been interesting because it could have happened while retaining the morally gray feeling of the show, since there would have been a lot of interesting conflicts between how Jinx and Vi handled situations, especially given that Vi still kinda sees Jinx as little old defenseless Powder. The other main conflict would be how to handle the Hex Tech crystal. Jinx has, to put it lightly, abandonment issues. And if she felt like Vi was just using her to get the crystal, she could have still ran away. So we'd have a super interesting conflict between Caitlyn needing the crystal to go back topside, and Jinx not wanting to feel used for the crystal. And Vi, who loves both of them, and having to struggle between who and how to support them. Unfortunately though, in this scenario, Echo wouldn't fit very well into this at all, and his character arc would kind of just, pause until he meets Heimerdinger. Also, Silco would have eventually gone chasing after Jinx and Vi, in order to try and get his daughter back, meaning that the Act 3 main Undercity conflict would have probably been centered around that, and the Hex Crystal, which is basically what it already was. I think this would have been a super interesting plotline since we'd have to see these characters actually resolve these conflicts directly, rather than Jinx and Vi being separated by fate again. That being said, given that Arcane is essentially a prequel to the characters we have in League of Legends, we know that Jinx and Vi would inevitably have to separate. I want you to imagine how that would happen, and leave a comment below telling me how you think it would happen. If you enjoyed the video enough to watch it this far, you gotta give it a like. Just let me know that you like it. And if you're still here, consider subscribing. I plan to put out a lot more content very soon.